Hot.
It's 5:05 and welcome into a Thursday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Well, South Carolina is putting the squeeze on the Tar Heel State as top leaders there gathered earlier this week to unveil a bold tax plan to slash the state's income tax by nearly 40%, setting their sights on outpacing North Carolina in its tax competitiveness. The proposed cut in the Palmetto State would drop South Carolina's income tax from where it currently is at 6.2% to 3.99%. It's part of an effort there to offer residents a better deal than neighboring states, including both North Carolina and Georgia. The South Carolina governor, Speaker of the House, and President of the Senate revealed the plan to collapse the state's current two-tiered tax system and replace it with a single flat tax rate of 3.99%. Gradually, as key economic conditions are met, the state's income tax would be reduced further to 2.5%. The South Carolina Representative Bruce Bannister, the Republican out of Greenville, said, quote, South Carolina will have a lower income tax rate than many of our neighboring states, lower than North Carolina, Georgia, lower than Alabama, and Virginia. That makes us not only more competitive, but also more attractive to new businesses and more affordable for families to call South Carolina home. As it stands right now, South Carolina currently has the highest state income tax in the Southeast. During the press conference, lawmakers also suggested lowering sales tax as well as property taxes. With North Carolina's current flat income tax rate of 4.25%, leaders repeatedly mentioned the state due to its enhanced tax rates over the past decade. According to Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, he said, quote, immediately you guys are going to get ahead of Georgia and North Carolina. North Carolina's been doing this for 12 years, and you're going to be leaping ahead of them and then continuing to match them as they ratchet down and become completely competitive with their neighboring states. Before 2013, North Carolina had a progressive tax system that ranged from 7.75% going down. But Republican majorities in the General Assembly have passed significant tax reforms in the state since then, lowering and flattening income tax as well as corporate income tax rates. Further tax cuts are scheduled to continue to take place across the state. Personal tax rates, which are currently 3.99%, will currently continue to drop, which is when South Carolina's proposal would take effect as well for 2026. Looking at some additional comments there, Brian Bulford, the vice president of research for the John Locke Foundation, said, quote, North Carolina has been a national leader in tax reform over the past dozen years. It's only natural that other states would want to emulate what we've done. If South Carolina were to implement this change, they would match North Carolina's scheduled rate reduction to 3.99%. Balfour noted that neighboring competition could place additional pressure on North Carolina lawmakers as they look for new ways to offer economic benefits in the state. He told us over at Carolina Journal, quote, South Carolina's proposal underscores the point that North Carolina can't stand still when it comes to tax reform and may very well put pressure on our legislature to establish a more aggressive tax cut timeline in order to stay ahead of our southern neighbors. While Republicans in North Carolina have championed additional tax cuts, Democrats have raised concerns over the state revenue. Governor Josh Stein's latest budget proposal out last week suggests terminating further income tax cuts scheduled to take effect in 2026. North Carolina, again, a lot has taken place over the last decade or so, but some neighboring pressure from South Carolina and other states could force lawmakers to potentially cut rates even more from 3.99%, where they are slated to be coming up in 2026. We'll continue to track the details. not only right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, but of course on our website, carolinajournal.com, where it's now 5:09, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We have got some legislation we are tracking this morning out of the North Carolina General Assembly. For folks that have been following North Carolina politics going back around a decade or so, you may be familiar with the term the bathroom bill, HB 2, back from 2016. Well, there's some new legislation introduced by Republicans that Democrats are deeming just as bad as that, at least in their eyes. Is this just political outrage? Let's get some of the details on that from Brianna Kraemer from carolinajournal.com. She joins us on the News Hour this morning. Brianna, HB 2, the 2016 timeframe, put North Carolina at a national spotlight with outrage from folks on the political left. Walk us through some of the details of this new legislation that Democrats are now calling afoul of again.
Yes. So Senate Republicans filed the Women's Safety and Protection Act this week. And essentially what this would do is mandate that public facilities be used only by individuals of the same biological sex at that time, except for some different specific situations like family use or emergency. But really, it defines some key terms in this bill, such as biological sex, male, female, into state law, and it applies the definitions to spaces like restrooms, locker rooms, and sleeping quarters in places like schools and prisons, for example. And so Republicans are pushing this bill forward now, and Democrats had a lot to say on it on Tuesday. They held a press conference, and that's when they were able to react to this legislation and call it the infamous House Bill 2, the bathroom bill.
Now, Brandon, if we look at the national temperature, some of the national coverage right now, there's been a lot of discussion about this. We've seen even in Washington, D.C., members of Congress leading similar charges with restroom facilities within the United States Capitol. The political environment is very different than it was back in 2016. Funny enough, Trump is still kind of a relevant conversation in regards to all of it. But things have changed a little bit. Walk us through some of what the reaction has been from those on the political left.
Yeah, on the left, they have not changed. They asked yesterday during the press conference, didn't we learn our lesson? HB2 was originally in the state, and when that was introduced, how much damage it caused, they said, in terms of the economy and just the cultural response that got back in 2016. And so they were very much aligned with what they've said in the past when it comes to, gender identity kind of debate. But you know what? Republicans and different groups in support of this legislation say that times have changed since this was passed back in 2016, and polls show that the public has woken up to the fact that allowing men and boys and women and girls private spaces creates problems and robs women and girls of safety and privacy. And so I think there's definitely this division we're seeing between both sides on if the times have changed, if we're ready to enact it now versus in 2016 or not. But again, on the right, they're not saying this is exactly the same bill. There are some differences in that it's for public state-funded facilities rather than preventing local governments from passing ordinances that brought gender identity discussions to the table.
Of course, I think it's important to mention a lot of the messaging around HB2 from the political left was not exactly accurate in 2016. A lot of what was discussed was very much blown out of proportion and really ginned up into a much larger controversy than it probably needed to be. But Brianna, we turn back to Washington, D.C. We saw just back a couple of weeks ago President Donald Trump signing a piece of legislation dealing with protecting women's sports, and there's some analogs there to some discussion around this. He has absolutely won that issue on the national stage. Polling shows that as an 80-20 issue in terms of protecting young females and their opportunities to play in sports and have a safe environment to do something that they love, like play on a sports team. So I think it's hard to argue that times haven't changed.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. In a survey done last month by Pew Research, they found that Americans now say, or more Americans rather, now say they favor or strongly favor laws and policies that require transgender people to use public bathrooms that match their sex at birth. So we're seeing this evolution within the culture. We're seeing people change and start to favor it more so, at least conservative minded people. I think we still have a big group on the left that wants to kind of promote those ideas and push that to the center stage, just like we saw at the left-leaning press conference yesterday that we covered. But yeah, it's hard to say that times haven't changed. I think that kind of sparked a lot of it back in 2016. I just recall, the boycotts and the situation with Target and different companies coming out either for or against what North Carolina was doing. And so it did blow up into national outrage or support, however way you view it. But I feel like that's what actually sparked a lot of what we've now gone through as a country culturally, in terms of this transgender LGBT conversation that has taken hold in the country. And so I think we're seeing minds change, and we're seeing with the Trump administration a lot come down, and we're seeing it now at the state level again as well.
Brianna, obviously this could be a very consequential piece of legislation depending on how some of that media coverage and that national attention flows in. We'll be keeping an eye on that. Where can folks not only read the details from your story this morning, but as our continued coverage continues?
Yeah, you can go to carolinajournal.com and read the latest there.
Brianna Kraemer joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:16, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get a look at traffic, your early Thursday morning commute, an update on the roadways with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Good.
We're heading back to Heist Brewery and Barrel Arts coming up Wednesday, April the 16th from 7 to 9 p.m. for WBT's News and Brews. And, of course, we'd love to see you there. All of your WBT friends will be there to raise a glass with you and talk about the news and issues of the day. It's WBT's News and Brews headed your way Wednesday, April the 16th at Heist Brewery and Barrel Arts. Visit WBT.com this morning for tickets and event details. Cheers, and we look forward to seeing you at the Heist Brewery and Barrel Arts Wednesday, April the 16th, 7 to 9 p.m. It's now 5:21 on the Carolina Journal News Hour, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Turning our attention to Washington, D.C. this morning. Yesterday, the United States Senate confirmed former Republican North Carolina Representative Dan Bishop as the Deputy White House Budget Director in the U.S. Office of Management and Budget, OMB. The final vote, 53 to 45. Bishop will serve under OMB Director Russ Vaught and has been serving as a senior advisor at OMB while awaiting his official confirmation. For Bishop, his political career started as a Mecklenburg County Commissioner from 2005 to 2009. He then served in the North Carolina General Assembly as a state representative from 2015 to 2017, and then a state senator from 2017 to 2019. After that, he won a special election in September of 2019 to represent North Carolina's 9th Congressional District in Congress, serving in that role until 2023 when the district changed to the 8th Congressional District. Bishop continued serving before running for North Carolina Attorney General and falling short to fellow former Congressman Jeff Jackson, a Democrat, in the November general election here across the state. He has faced 2 Senate committees for his nomination, including the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. Those took place last month. U.S. Senator Ted Budd, one of our 2 senators here in the state, introduced Bishop and talked about their first meeting when Budd was in his late 20s running a landscaping and janitorial business, while at the time Bishop serving as a Mecklenburg County Commissioner. Fast forwarding to the time when they both served in Congress. Budd said of Bishop, quote, "I've seen firsthand his thoughtfulness, his deep understanding of the issues, his love for our country, his care for people, and his commitment to stopping runaway spending and getting the federal budget under control. I have no doubt that Dan will bring the same tendency to his job at OMB that has been shown throughout his career, both as a litigator and his time serving the people of North Carolina." President Donald Trump did nominate Bishop to that post in December. Bishop said it had been an honor to be nominated by Trump for such an important agency that crafts the president's budget, manages and coordinates it amongst federal agencies, along with implementing the president's regulatory agenda, and noted that that is a critical part of ensuring that the government responds to its democratically elected president to respond to the will of the American people, who, in fact, are looking for accountability, transparency, and an end to the waste that Washington's status quo has set up. At the time, he said, quote, "They recognize in this past election that our nation was at a crossroads on our principles of either renewed greatness or ruin. In that precise moment, they placed their confidence in President Donald Trump to usher in a new golden age for America, and I'm here on behalf of that mission." Questioning and statements ran along party lines, with Democrats telling Bishop that his records and views, including support for legislation that would make all federal employees at will, gives them serious pause on how he would manage the federal workforce. Democrats also said that they had questions about Bishop's record for what they said was a, quote, disregard for independent oversight, including retaliatory actions in regards to whistleblowers. Other representatives, including Senator Andy Kim from New Jersey, would ask if there were any recent firings of several civil servant employees under OMB, with Bishop responding no, adding that changes might be necessary after those advising Trump took a look at the size of the federal workforce. Dan Bishop said that he supports President Trump's views, which include impounding or spending money that has been appropriated by Congress, and that decision-making would involve lawyers, not him. When Senator Elisa Slotkin of Michigan asked if he believes that the president has the ability to spend appropriated dollars in different ways than they were initially appropriated. Committee Chair Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky said that there has been a lot of good coming out of the investigations into agencies like USAID, which the Department of Government Efficiency has already found $2 million in taxpayer monies that have been saved. So there has been some movement there as well. Bishop said that he's learned a great deal about DOGE and some of the programs that are currently taking place within the federal government through research since being nominated, and will pay close attention to those various matters. So the big news out of Washington, D.C. this morning, former Representative Dan Bishop, now officially the White House budget, a deputy White House budget director in the U.S. Office of Management and Budget. That is a great honor for Dan Bishop. We'll keep an eye on him and his new position over on our website, carolinajournal.com. Taking a look at some statewide news this morning, the legal battle between North Carolina Governor Josh Stein and state legislative leaders over control of the State Board of Election is set to be decided by a 3-judge panel by May the 1st. Stein, a Democrat, is seeking to block the new law, Senate Bill 382. That legislation shifts the power to the appointments in regards to the Board of Elections from the governor to the state auditor's office, where current Republican Dave Bolick presides there. Stein argues that the law unconstitutionally undermines the governor's executive authority by allowing the legislature to dictate who appoints key officials, violating separation of powers. Republican lawmakers, on the other hand, contend that the General Assembly has the constitutional authority to reassign appointment powers within the executive branch. The panel will consist of Judges Edwin Wilson, a Democrat, as well as Lori Hamilton and Andrew Womble, both Republicans, so a 2-1 Republican majority on the appeals court panel. They will hear oral arguments coming up April the 14th. Both Stein and legislative leaders have requested summary judgments seeking a decision without a trial. The lawsuit is part of a broader legal fight over Senate Bill 382, which also includes challenges to changes in appointments to the State Highway Patrol and judiciary vacancies. So the big news on that this morning is that we will get a ruling from the court system here by May the 1st. Why is that date relevant? Well, May the 1st is when Senate Bill 382 officially goes into effect, and State Auditor Dave Bolick would then have his purview over the State Board of Elections. So one way or the other, that ruling will come down before that May the 1st deadline. It's going to be a major political story across the state. We'll track it as we head into the month of April right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour and on our website, carolinajournal.com, where it's now 5:28. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Time to get another look at the roadways on a Thursday morning. A look at traffic with Boomer Von Cannon.
Thank you, Nick.
hot. It's 5:35. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We are keeping an eye this morning on wildfires that continue to burn across the state of North Carolina and South Carolina. Firefighters announced progress Wednesday night on containing two of the largest fires burning in the state, both of those in Polk County. Hundreds of individuals have been asked to leave their homes across both North and South Carolina as around half a dozen large fires continue burning in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Millions of fallen trees from September's Hurricane Helene are both providing fuel for the wildfires and hindering firefighters' ability to use logging roads and paths that they would normally use to get access to these burns. The North Carolina Forest Service reporting last night that the Black Cove Fire and the Deep Woods Fire, both in Polk County, were each more than 10% contained after days of reporting 0% for the two blazes. The fires have scorched nearly 10 square miles combined, but fortunately the size of the area burned has largely remained the same since Tuesday, so that's really good news there. About 250 homes have been evacuated in Polk County, where the fires are centered, and about 24 homes and outbuildings have already been burned there, according to spokespersons for the North Carolina Forest Service. Firefighters have managed to save most of the structures near the fire, and only one injury, thankfully, has been reported so far. A firefighter in North Carolina got his leg caught under a tree, but was fortunately okay. There is some good news. Rain is scheduled in the forecast for this weekend, but it isn't any kind of soaking downpours that is likely to knock out the fire, according to the National Weather Service out of South Carolina. So, good update this morning. Containment continuing. Crews from the North Carolina Forest Service working on those two major fires in Polk County. We'll keep an eye on it right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:37. It is the month of March. Many folks patiently and eagerly watching their brackets for the NCAA men's tournament come and go with busting each and every year. What if I told you that there was a bracket for North Carolina politics? Well, we've got one of those this morning. Andrew Dunn from Longleaf Politics joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Andrew, you created a 64-man bracket surrounding North Carolina politics, sayings, and traditions. Walk us through how you came up with this idea and some of the interesting things for our video viewers over at the Carolina Journal YouTube channel. We'll show some of that. Walk us through these details.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the show. I love March Madness. I grew up in North Carolina, so college basketball has always been super important to me. Love filling out brackets. And I love when publishers put together, different kinds of brackets, not just basketball, but on all sorts of topics. So I knew I wanted to do something, but I struggled to come up with an idea. How can I capture what my publication, Longleaf Politics, is about? And so that's how I landed on this, the ultimate North Carolina politics showdown. It's not about trying to figure out who's the most powerful person in the state or who's the favorite. It's really about trying to determine what most encapsulates North Carolina politics, what embodies North Carolina politics. And so that's how I got started and put together this bracket. I separated it into a couple different quadrants. On one side, you've got the power players, the people. Then you've got more moments, individual periods of time that sum up North Carolina politics. Then on the other side of the bracket, you've got more cultural debates. So you've got East versus West barbecue, always a conversation starter in North Carolina. And then finally, I had a region around, I called it the rhetoric region, but it's really about marketing or slogans or TV ads or things like that. And we've been working our way through the process ever since.
There's so many eclectic things on the list here. Walk us through some of first of all, tell us what region they're in and some of your favorite things that you've got on your bracket showdown here.
Yeah, well, I think we had some really strong number one seeds in each quadrant of the bracket. So in the power player region, Jim Hunt, former Governor Jim Hunt, was a pretty clear number one seed, a 4-term governor who basically defined modern North Carolina politics. Under moments, that was also a pretty easy choice for a number one seed. The Republican Revolution in the 2010 elections, where, after a century of being out of power, Republicans took control of the General Assembly. On the debates, I already mentioned it, but the East versus West barbecue debate, another clear number one. And then in the rhetoric region, that was a little bit harder to come up with a number one seed, but I went with Esse Quam Videre, the state motto. And that actually has made it all the way to the championship round. All four number one seeds made it to the Elite Eight. But our winner actually was something of a Cinderella story.
Walk us through how this process went. You publish over at Longleaf Politics. You follow North Carolina politics very closely. You had your audience members, your readers, voting on these various brackets and these matchups.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I put out the bracket initially, and there were 32 different matchups for readers to vote on. And then when we finished that round, we moved on to the next. But it was all the people's choice.
So we've now just got the winning bracket out yesterday afternoon, and to full disclosure, it is in fact. Well, actually, I'll have you go ahead and announce it, and then I'll give my disclaimer. A battle of number one seeds. Andrew, walk us through it.
Yeah, so the final matchup ended up being out of the left side of the bracket, the John Locke Foundation, and on the other side, Esse Quam Videre. Powerful matchup there.
So the John Locke Foundation, again, full disclosure, Carolina Journal News Hour and our Carolina Journal publication, a subsidiary of the John Locke Foundation. Why do you think this worked its way through not only its successful seed in the power player region, but ended up winning out overall?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think part of it has to do with just how many people in North Carolina have been affected or been a part of the John Locke Foundation. There's an alumni network around the state, and there's so many people who rely on the foundation and the Carolina Journal to really make sense of North Carolina politics. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But kind of at a deeper level, I don't really see a whole lot of difference between what the John Locke Foundation embodies and what Esse Quam Videre embodies. To be rather than to seem. The John Locke Foundation really embodies some of those ideals that I think are the real undercurrents of our state. Substance over flash, being thoughtful, intellectual rigor, all those sorts of things. And so I think that's why you saw the two competitors who made it to the final.
So now this is going to be an interesting one for you. You made the bracket. You mentioned earlier that you like creating brackets and playing through them. Did you make your own version of this bracket? Did you predict this as the winner, or was it just so much putting it all together that you didn't have a chance to fill one out yourself?
I didn't do anything formal to predict it. I think the seeds more or less encapsulate what I thought would happen. So I definitely didn't see the John Locke Foundation making it as far as it did. I'm not upset about it. I think it was a great result. But I think that, there were some surprises for me, though. I really thought 100 county tours would go farther than it did. That's kind of like it's a tried and true North Carolina politics tradition to visit all 100 counties. So I thought that would go far. The biggest surprise for me, though, was that the Jim Black scandal from, 20, 30 years ago now didn't go as far as it did. The cash being handed over allegedly in the IHOP bathroom. I found that readers may not remember that. So a little surprised there, but I'm glad it was in the bracket.
Well, let me ask you about this for a second. I mean, North Carolina has seen such an influx of individuals, even over just the last 10 or 15 years. A lot of the stuff on the bracket, Andrew, is things that if you're just relatively new to the state, I mean, you can even go back to 2016, 2015. And if you just moved to the state, you would have never known that Democrats had been in control of the state, as you noted, for 100 years ahead of that revolution. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I think there definitely was a a bias, so to speak, in the results toward things that were more recent, and that's okay. I hope that, for someone who's new to North Carolina politics, I hope if they saw something on here that didn't ring a bell, I hope they went in and researched it and came to understand North Carolina politics a little bit better.
Andrew, tell us a little bit more about Longleaf Politics and the works that you do over there and how folks can stay connected and in tune with you.
Yeah, Longleaf Politics. It's a weekly newsletter on the Substack platform. Every Monday morning, I send out. It usually starts with a column, and then it's got some more quick hit analysis and commentary. It's all about understanding North Carolina politics in a deeper way.
And
you can find it at longleafpol.com.
Andrew, thanks so much for the time this morning. Andrew Dunn from Longleaf Politics joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's now 5:46, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get another look at traffic on your Thursday morning. An update on the roadways with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick.
Good morning again. It's 5:51. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Taking a look at some news out of South Carolina this morning. Top leaders there have announced a plan to cut the state's income tax from where it is at currently 6.2% to 3.99%, aiming to surpass North Carolina in its tax competitiveness at the national level. The proposal, backed by the governor, House Speaker, and Senate President, would simplify the tax system in South Carolina into a single flat rate, with a further reduction to 2.49% as economic conditions allow. Lawmakers also hinted at possible reductions in sales and property taxes. The plan directly challenges North Carolina, which currently has a tax rate of 4.25%, which is set to drop to 3.99% next year, the same year that South Carolina's cuts would take effect. Experts note that South Carolina's move could pressure North Carolina lawmakers to accelerate their own tax reforms. While Republicans in North Carolina support further tax cuts, Democrat Governor Josh Stein has proposed halting scheduled reductions due to revenue concerns. He brought that forward in his budget recommendation that came out middle part of last week, and pushed pretty heavily on not continuing to reduce those taxes. Brian Belfort, the vice president of research at the John Locke Foundation, said, quote, North Carolina has been a national leader in tax reform over the last dozen years, and it's only natural that other states would want to emulate what we've done. If South Carolina wants to implement these changes, they would match North Carolina's schedule, noting that North Carolina can't stand still when it comes to tax reform, and may very well, the change in South Carolina, quote, may very well put pressure on our legislators to establish a more aggressive timetable for tax cuts in order to stay ahead of our southern neighbors. So that has been proposed, and it could potentially have a major impact in terms of North Carolina politics, and especially for businesses that move to the state. We've seen a huge amount of business growth over the last over the last decade or so, as some of these changes have come into effect, making North Carolina not only a friendly state for business, but a more friendly environment for individuals and their personal income taxes. We'll keep an eye on it right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, and of course on our website, carolinajournal.com. Up in Washington, D.C. yesterday, former Republican North Carolina Representative Dan Bishop was confirmed as the Deputy White House Budget Director in the U.S. Office of Management and Budget, OMB, with a 53-45 vote in the U.S. Senate. Bishop, who previously served as a senior advisor at OMB, will work under Director Russ Vaught. His political career includes roles as a Mecklenburg County Commissioner, a North Carolina state legislator, and a U.S. congressman. He most recently lost a North Carolina Attorney General race to Democrat Jeff Jackson. That was in November of last year. Bishop, nominated by former President Donald Trump in December, emphasized his commitment to fiscal responsibility, government transparency, and ending wasteful spending. During Senate questioning, Democrats raised questions about Bishop's support for making all federal employees at will and past actions regarding whistleblower protections. Republicans during those hearings praised his conservative approach to budgeting, with U.S. Senator Ted Budd highlighting his dedication to cutting that federal spending. Bishop pledged to support President Trump's budget policies and work to improve financial transparency, agreeing to enforce stricter spending reporting requirements across federal agencies and the federal government as a whole. And his confirmation aligns with the administration's broader goal of reshaping the federal budget management and oversight. A huge honor for Representative Dan Bishop. He will now serve up in the U.S. Office of Management and Budget. Lots of big things happening there. We'll, of course, keep an eye on his new role there in that position. Some good news to pass along to you this morning in the wildfire fights that continue in the western half of the state this morning. The latest details out of the North Carolina Forest Service report that the Black Cove Fire and the Deep Woods Fire, both of those burning in Polk County are more than 10% contained as of this morning. This comes after just a few days of 0% containment since these fires started. They were growing each and every day, with crews unfortunately unable to contain those blazes. And fortunately this morning, the good news is they have been able to get those at least somewhat under control. The fires have scorched nearly 10 square miles combined, and other good news to pass along is the size of the burn area has largely remained the same since Tuesday, so not much growth from those fires as well. With that, hundreds of individuals have been asked to leave their homes in both North and South Carolina, as around half a dozen large fires continue burning in the Blue Ridge Mountains, spreading smoke and fire into places, threatening people's homes and businesses. And of course, those millions of trees that were toppled over during Hurricane Helene are providing not only fuel for those fires to continue to burn, but hindering firefighters in their efforts to use switchback logging roads and other paths to get to those blazes and get them under control. We'll keep an eye on the wildfires right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Well, that's going to do it for a Thursday edition. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We're back with you tomorrow morning, 5 to 6, right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.